I think of the freestyle of Hakafa the way we are, I always think of one of our members, Norm Weiner. Norm's been a member for a really long time. Many of us know him from XRT. I wanted you to have the opportunity to see him in the context of Hakafa. Enjoy the episode. All right, here we go, everybody. It's nice to see you again. Norm Weiner. I have to tell you, when I started this podcast and my family sat around and they said, who should we get to be on Hakafa's Points on the Circle? Norm Weiner's name came up on numerous family members. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very proud and flattered to be on the point with you.
I hope you say that afterwards for the 80
No, to
people
come
that
to the
watch.
point. Let me put it that way. To come to the point. Thank
Yeah,
you.
because sometimes
Yeah.
we never get to the point. All right, so here's where I want to start with you. You're a diehard Cubs fan.
Baseball fan. I'd say baseball fan. I'm not kedging, but I mean,
Okay.
I have a global appreciation of baseball.
So where did that come from? Why?
Well, I've lived in Chicago for over 40 years. I dive into my passion for baseball. I follow the White Sox as well, but I lived in the neighborhood, in closest proximity to the Cubs. All my friends either grew up as Cub fans, for generations. And there was a team that's very, until it became a real estate deal, and until some of the commercial aspects of it kicked in during the Tribune years.
Uh-huh.
It was just a pure love of baseball in the daylight, and then it got complicated. And then but what I realized about the Cubs, and why my heart goes out to them and to their fans, was because it was a history of futility. And I experienced that being a Brooklyn Dodger fan, being a native of Brooklyn, and they left us. And I vowed at that time that, and I've lived up to that vow, that I would never buy a hot dog from the O'Malley family. They're gone, but I never went to Chavez Ravine to date, and that was before I knew about the real estate swindle kicking out all of the minorities and Hispanics and low-income families in that area, and they swindled the Giants. And I moved to San Francisco before I lived here, so I would go to a lot of games because they were in the worst, windiest part of town.
I'm so glad, Norm, you don't carry a grudge. You can just tell. Well, so you and
Yeah,
I have been
yeah.
kidding a lot. We went to a game. You, Wendy, and me went to a game, and we always talk about going to another one. And because I'm a baseball lover too. I think you love it on the statistic. You know more about it than I do. I can't watch it on television for the life of me. I'd rather watch grass grow and people. I can watch golf on television, but not baseball. But I love going to baseball games, and I love the energy. And I have been struggling as an Ohio State fan for a really long time. Football, right? Between the love that I have bred within me for them for a lot of reasons, and the reality of the tradition of what that team's become, right? In terms of scandals over the years and what have you. And that's kind of where I wanted to start with you in terms of, if not the Cubs specifically, because you talked about baseball in general and the commercialization about it. How do you reconcile, for instance, are you willing to still go to Cubs games given that the Ricketts are owners?
My economics are different now than they were when I was a part of the company, CBS Radio, which I was an executive
Uh-huh.
for. When they negotiated with the Cubs to come over from WGN, my boss at the time said, I think the only witty thing he had ever said, when he commented during the pitch to Theo Epstein and to the brass of the Cubs, Crane Kennedy and so on, Crane Kennedy, that, the reason for your 95-year, at that time, a 95-year drought in terms of championships was not so much to do with the Black Cat or the Billy Goat or whatever. It was really WGN. Come over to CBS, and that's how we lured them. But I sat there when Theo Epstein was showing us the amateur videos of all the young talent coming up, 22, 23 years old at the time, and it became Bryant and Schwarber and and all those hot shots. I mean, that was an exciting thing. And the room was filled with salespeople, and they were all texting, or actually on their Blackberries probably then, and and I was taking it all in, like the geek that I am, like the baseball geek. Look at that guy. And they kept saying, great chemistry. They're going to be good for the team. And of course, the 5-year plan. Okay. And I was a Red Sox fan for many years because I lived in Boston. And that's when I went to my second World Series game
Uh-huh.
in 2004. I watched that end. So Theo was on a pedestal for me already when he was the youngest baseball executive. So I like the way he did things. I've supported his charity, which is a foundation to be named later. a great name for baseball fans. And we've done a lot of good in the community in Chicago, and and also bringing music to the people. Bringing that, so that was important to me. But the Cubs ownership is going to a different place now, and I appreciate a house that blocks out the sun on Lake Michigan and Wilmette from the Ricketts. But there's a lot of people who could use some help now, and it's not just the season ticket holders.
So and the question is, without belaboring,
Oh,
we don't have
sorry.
to, we don't have, no. You answered that really well. It doesn't have to be the Ricketts, because I didn't even ask if you have a personal relationship with it. Just in general, what happens when you've got this love and this passion for something, and then it takes a turn in such a way that its ownership, or where the dollars go, or what have you, doesn't jive with your politics, your belief, your morals.
That's almost as though, if I might say, Bruce, it's almost though you're setting me up, because there are a few things I'd rather discuss, and this is the only time I will apologize for previously digressing, because that is so important. When I gave up on baseball, when I became a college kid, and had, working on changing the world, sociology, that was my world, and baseball was meaningless to me. And then I rediscovered it in Boston in the 70s, but it was all about the politics. I was very lucky. I'll drop a name. I became very good friends with Bill Spaceman Lee, the wacky left-handed pitcher for the Red Sox in the mid 70s, who was key to the Red Sox getting to where they got, which was, a game I attended. So I guess, the game I attended, what they called until 1976, sorry, Bruce, the greatest game ever played. That was, sixth game of the 1975 World Series. And I sat by myself with a redneck, blue collar bartender from Dorchester, and we jumped up and down. We were making out. We were like, we were engaged by the end of the game. It was astounding, greatest game ever, right? To be there. The Carlton Fisk game, that was this one.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the politics of who owned the Yankees, for example, who I jumped ship after the Dodgers left, I became a Yankee fan just because that was their arch nemesis, and I wanted to root for the Yankees. And luckily for me, it was the Mantle, Maris, Yogi Berra, the greatest team, 5 consecutive championships, Casey Stengel, and so on. And that enabled me to root against the Dodgers still, because, they would play each other after they moved to LA. But the politics of the people, the BB Rebozo friends and the, Nixon compadres who wound up becoming part of the Yankee ownership when they were a corporate entity, all of that stuff becomes a part of your interest and support of the team. And so Bill Lee became a friend of mine, and I'd never met a real live baseball player before, and he'd never met a real live DJ before. I would take him out to have petitions signed on the weekend. He was notorious, and partly due to the influence of me and my friends on him, to get involved in social causes. And being a celebrity as a baseball fan, because as Chicago loves, the Cubs and Cubs players, that's how Boston is, especially with all those years of futility. And so it was really something to have him sign petitions for, regarding racism and, segregation and busing in those days in the mid 70s, and, so many important issues. And baseball players rarely stepped out of the diamond context or the TV or whatever to get involved in the real world. And now, as we look at, say the NFL this year, and I haven't been watching much sports, even baseball didn't really interest me until the World Series, but the fact that players are enabled, and now, as of a few days ago, the Olympic athletes for the U.S. are going to be enabled to actually be what they used to be calling outspoken. Right. what the Olympians with their leather fists clenched, years ago were chastised for doing and penalized for doing. The fact that now athletes can speak up, like LeBron James has done, much to his credit. I know that Michael Jordan this year has won something like Sports Person of the Year or something, because he had the highest ratings of any sporting event, because everybody was looking for the Kentucky Derby and first weekend in May, and it was on in September. And the same for the golf tournaments, tennis tournaments, all that stuff. So but Michael Jordan's 12-part series was eye-opening, because he revealed who he really was. And he was an icon for us as sports fans in Chicago, waking up every morning and knowing who they were playing, what cable channel they'd be on, because that was an issue back then. And because teams didn't own specific cable channels, and knowing, and we lived that part. It was a phenomenal time for Chicago sports fans. But Michael did diddly for the people.
Right. And he was actually very honest about that. He was actually honest about that in the series.
Yes, he was. Yes. Yeah. He put down his drink and his cigar, and he said that.
But, so do you think, Obviously, you do. So let's expound upon this more. I told Rona at the beginning, as they decided to play college football, that I refused to watch Ohio State this year because I thought it was so asinine that they were going to put college kids out there to make a buck and expose them to COVID. And so I said, you know what? I am not watching. I'm not watching. I'm not watching. I have not missed a moment. I have not missed a freaking moment. So, so this is a two-part question, right? One is about, do you think that morality has a place in sports and should be there? And two, what does that say about our individual morality? Or you can analyze me, right? And say, Bruce, does your morality only exist to the extent that you want what you want? So
Well,
respond to both sides of those if you
can
would.
I have some questions here that I do have for you if you have some extra time later on. Hockey stationary. Say
There you
this.
go. Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that.
um,
Does morality have a place?
can I
Is it?
say, can I change the word? I mean, this is an old interviewee trick where you change the question into an answer that you want to give.
Go ahead.
But not to quibble, but I would say humanity rather than morality, because morality is sort of a judgment, a call of what's right and what's wrong. I mean, with morality, it's not all morality is not good, right? There's
Yeah.
which is not good.
Well, I mean, that's why I asked the question. Well, that's why I asked the question subjectively. So, what do you mean by humanity? Define humanity.
Well,
then,
humanity is just is a broader scope. I think humanity is being, because I think that's one of the major issues. I think it's one of the things that distinguishes the Jewish people from others, and it's a matter of a broader set of priorities and criteria for how to conduct yourself, for how to lead your life, for how to raise your children and grandchildren if you're lucky enough, and I think that that's a broader scope for people to, because in professional sports, I mean, to me, my wife Wendy is this is her 10th year as a school teacher, as a public school teacher, and
10 years already. My God! All right,
10
go
years,
ahead.
isn't that something? And that was like the secret life of Wendy Rice, because she had a distinguished career before that in media, and and she decided to be a teacher for a lot of reasons, and partly because good teachers are so necessary. And that was back in the old days, of course, when teachers were in the same classrooms as the kids, but the connection that she makes with them, sorry, but the connection she makes with them and the encouragement she gives them, and especially as a teacher who has been on the receiving end of parent-teacher conferences,
Yeah.
that's hearing them say, I mean, the joy as a parent, just feeling so good. I'm looking for the Yiddish word, just nachas, I think, hearing them say, a pleasure to have in class.
Yeah.
And bring, and then the next kid same thing. But the thing is, Wendy will say very specific things, constructive and flattering when she can, and otherwise, just to try to, get the parents on the same page and be the source of encouragement, and so on. But the thing is that you want, she did it because, to me, the injustice was, okay, and I know where I started this.
I know we did too. I was going to get you back there. Don't worry.
Because utility infielders, Bruce, are making $6 million a year for popping up with runners in scoring position. And teachers?
Oh, that's always been my beef, right?
Right.
Way back when I wrote bad songs, I talked about that, right? Is that what kind of priorities do we have then that it pays more to hit a ball than it does to teach a kid how to read, right? And yet the flip of that is, and this is about the humanity, is that the response to sports should have humanity is sports are the one place where we can all escape and just experience the pleasure. So if they make the money that they do, God love them. Let's not begrudge them the money that they make. If not, the owners would be making it, right? And on one level, unless they're hurting people in the process, let them make their money as well. But isn't the humanity the escapism? And don't we lose some of that humanity when it's brought to the field? Now, I actually don't agree with that, but I'm pushing that on you.
Well, I will circumvent that a specific answer to that, a direct answer to that, to bring up a few related points. Okay, and part of it is that sports should be entertainment.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. And the people have said that, when we spend certain seasons reading about the strikes, reading about the collective bargaining agreements. I mean, we know as sports fans, there are baseball stats now that I don't know what the acronyms are for. And I realize at this point in my life, one of the things I need to do is learn an acronym or two a day, because there are things in the business world that I never previously cared about, and the digital world, which I'm, involved in now. And but in sports, I can't follow baseball. I can't be a reliable or responsible owner of my fantasy baseball team, which is very real. Even don't let the fantasy, deceive you, congregants. The fact is that unless I know what weighted runs created plus means. I've got to study. I've got to study for fantasy baseball. But the point is this, that one of the things that's the most disturbing to me, which I'm mentioning before you asked me about it, that, and I said this to Wendy a few times, and of course she's the only person I talk to live. It's gambling. Gambling has become so interconnected with, and I'm setting you up now. Get ready. It's so interconnected with professional
Always has.
sports.
Always
And
has.
there was a thing in the news a few days ago that I think the CU, I think Colorado, with their truncated season, is allowing them to work with gambling businesses to try to raise more money for the school, given the shorter season they have or the lack of alumni support, whatever. But the point is that, having Las Vegas, a very successful hockey team right off the stick, and also now a football team, the Raiders, and which was a no-no. That was a taboo for so many years of our lives, everybody's lives, and
But it was
now it's
always there,
interconnected.
Norm. It was
When
always
I
there,
get
though.
when I get bulletins from CBS Sportsline, which gives me details about that, most of it, 2/3 of it, is devoted to the odds of the game, the over under. Not the players, not the performances, not the health conditions anymore. It's all about the odds. And the New York Times, in
Well,
their brilliant one-page description of all of the Sunday football games, they on the corner now, because they're I'm guessing many of their readers don't normally gamble on sports. They describe what the odds are and what they mean and what all the shorthand means.
but I
So
can make
that's
the
totally
argument, Norm.
interconnected now.
But Norm, I can make the argument, which means I'm about to, right? Is that given that the digital age and social media has accelerated our acquisition of information, it means it takes more to interest us and excite us. So that what's going on the field anymore doesn't excite us like it used to because it's too slow. So we have to be invested in it. And so by elevating gambling, it puts us in the game. It's what gambling's always done. And gambling's always been part of the game. It's just now legal, right? So what it does now is engages people differently, and it makes me feel like I have an investment beyond my traditional investments that I had vis-a-vis Ohio State. So right,
So
so
may I ask you a question?
where's the humanity in that?
May I ask you a question then?
Go ahead.
Is that what it means to have a rabbi's discretion fund, a discretionary fund?
No, Norm, that's my indiscretionary fund.
Okay.
Everybody knows that I siphon off part of my discretionary fund as an indiscretionary fund to send people who deserve it to Tahiti, and I will put you up on the list if you need it.
I'm lucky to just be here. I'm glad to be on the point.
Right. So so when athletes decide to take a moral stand, is that the right thing to do? You're saying it's on I'll just leave it there. Is it the right thing
Well,
to do?
here's another parallel. I grew up in the 60s, listening to music, listening to protest music, listening to early classic Bob Dylan, singing songs, that addressed issues that had never previously been put to music,
Yeah.
certainly not on Broadway. And protest singers, folk singers, artists singing protest songs, Volunteers of America by the Jefferson Airplane. You kids, look it up online.
Such a good song.
But Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Yeah, but this isn't a parallel, Norm, because
but artists then stopped in the 80s up until the mid 90s. Artists simply ceased adding social commentary to their performances, which was commonplace, which is sometimes Country Joe and the Fish wouldn't have existed if there weren't for the Fish cheer.
Yeah, but
Woodstock. Look it
rap
up on YouTube, kids.
Rap is all about social commentary.
True. But that's not that's not for the total audience of music lovers. There are people who really don't consume rap music.
You don't think Madonna did that?
Of course, the masses do.
Oh, here we go. This is such a Talmudic page of a conversation we're having. We're just flowing. You don't think Madonna was making social commentary in the 1980s?
That you could dance to? Sure, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, what made Madonna Madonna, right, was the complete desire to throw to spit in the eye of patriarchal norms, right, and religious norms.
Yeah.
No pun intended with your name.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, you're right. Look, I grew up in the 80s, right? I mean, I graduated high school, graduated college in the 80s. I am the beginning of Gen X. I always say the difference between your generation and mine is that you guys were getting stoned on Dylan, and we were snorting cocaine to Max Headroom. I get the difference, right? I mean, it's not the same thing, and I didn't do cocaine for the record, but that's just indicative of the difference in the generations. The music did change, but there was its own form of protest in and of itself.
but the absence of, people still admired music performers, and I'm talking about in the rock genre, Americana, alt country in those days, and they were talking about middle class white audiences for the most part. But at a certain point, they just started singing about, love or personal events, or in some cases growing older, but they didn't really sing about the issues of the day. And then there was a famous op-ed piece in the New York Times that in the early 90s, Bruce Springsteen wrote, because he never really addressed his politics. Yes, here in Chicago, he had a table at every one of his concerts for years for the accepting donations to the Greater Chicago Food Depository and offering more information about them, leaflets and so on, before the days of digital. But the thing is that when he wrote this op-ed piece, he said, we can no longer sit around and hope that the election will turn out all right. This was after Bush won. And when the campaign was still underway, he and Dave Matthews and Neil Young and REM and John Mellencamp and a bunch of other artists announced this, and this was the gist of this op-ed piece, this Vote for Change tour, which took people to selected cities around the country. They split up the superstars, but there was still a phenomenal, expensive ticket, but it was for Democratic advertising and for the Democratic Party, for advertising and to push Bill Clinton into the White House for, given the options.
So you are linking them well. And so here's my pushback, right? So yes, Jefferson Airplane, whom I loved, became freaking Starship, right? In the 1980s. Yeah. Wow, oy vavoy. Right?
That's hitting below the belt.
But Runaway was one of my favorite songs in the late 70s, early 80s when I was a young sap instead of an old one. But here's the point that I
thought you liked Miracles. I thought Miracles.
And what happened to Styx, right? All these groups, and even Neil Young with his Transformer. I'm a big Neil Young fan. Anyhow, we'll come back to that. But here's the connection that you're making between sports and music, or I'm going to make it. Do you believe for a moment that Jerry Jones is all of a sudden Black Lives Matter, hands up, fist pump? No. The only reason the NFL is doing this is for financial reasons, right? And if it can allow its players to actually express themselves, they're only doing it because it's making money for them. The same thing with all the, the music. And I want to talk, that was one of the topics I was hoping to touch with you because of who and what you are, is that the music industry, the only reason that Airplane was braiding Airplane songs and everybody else, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, was because the genre was selling, right? Because what happened to Graham Nash in the 1980s, right?
So he wrote the song about Chicago, that solo record,
Yeah, that was in the 70s. It was still lucrative to do that.
It's kind of a haze to me, honestly. No,
I mean,
but I can answer that. But I can answer that from a media standpoint, and you'll get the really, really short version of this. And do you think it's okay for everybody if I explain to people that even though I don't have a New York accent, having grown up there, I'm still, if I'm doing business or talking to a New Yorker, I can talk really fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
But it'll be understandable, I hope. You could always slow this down a little bit. But the thing is that music in the 70s was not music in the 60s was only on singles, only on top 40 radio. There was no FM radio. There was no album radio. People weren't buying albums yet until, depending on how old you were, until the late 60s, 67, 68, Sgt. Pepper, 1967, so you'd buy a Beatles album, you'd buy a Rolling Stones album, and then these acts that started coming up, their best songs weren't on the radio. I mean, I remember the irony of storming out of Boston Garden with our fists clenched, one of the first public performances. It's like a 17-minute version of Ohio by Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young. And we stormed out of there to liberate the neighborhood, which meant, and you saw some of that this summer and stuff, but it was not, fomented by anything but sheer passion and anger and frustration at the political climate. Again, Richard Nixon, if you're just tuning in. So the fact is that the people wouldn't hear those songs on the radio. They weren't fueling mass consciousness, but it was for that dedicated group of people who are high school kids and college kids. And, we just put out a film. It's going to be on PBS in 2021 about the climate in Boston when I was, graduated from Brandeis and then went to where we did takeovers and stuff like that. And protested, everything under the sun. But the radio station that I started my, semi-professional career on was a station that was linked to the movement, and that's what the film was about. It's called, our nickname when you signed on, not like classic hits or everything you want. It was the American Revolution, because we were not holding back. And this film about WBCN is fascinating because we'd have Jane Fonda after congressional hearings speaking live on our air. We had Abby Hoffman coming in for interviews. We did a skywriting. If you have to explain to the kids what that is, skywriting a peace sign over Boston Common on Moratorium Day, 1970. It was the centerfold of Life magazine. Please explain that to the kids.
Well, look,
So the thing is, music and the movement were always intact, but then after all, people didn't care, and that kind of radio didn't exist anymore. And
well, there's two reasons for that, or there's a lot of reasons for that. But and frankly, so look, the revolution and the movement about pushing back on your parents was about liberation, right? It was about liberation and individual freedom. And your individual freedom movement became the neocons of the 70s and 80s, right? And it promoted the me generation that I grew up in the 80s and 90s, right? So because liberation without some kind of structure, right, leads to what's the word I want? Myopic kind of selfish behavior, ultimately.
Well, he was decentralized, and really all that generation cared about it was me, me, me.
Ultimately, right. And I have to tell you, so maybe, sports now is having the opposite. They're finally having their liberation movement as players. We'll see how far that goes. But your point about music going from having meaning to being about love and personal stuff is the same trajectory that religion took as well. I mean, the biggest complaint about religion is what happened to it. And frankly, Nixon put a kibosh on it. Reagan then actually, put it in stone, and we've been fighting it since. But this whole idea that it's okay to be selfish, it's okay to be about me, and it's about, in Christianity, it's about personal salvation instead of collective salvation. In Judaism, it's about what you wear on the high holidays, right? We have evolved into something that music's been reflecting as well in America. Why do you think that is? Where does that come from?
I can't explain it. The human condition. I mean, I think
humanity
but I'm
again.
not.
You want humanity again?
I am. I'm going to bring it all. I'm going to tie it together because what's gone on here with people being sheltered and quarantined and sequestered by themselves. It's not about me anymore. I'm bored with me. I am so bored of hearing me talk, and I apologize to everybody who's listening or tuning in, and everybody else is. And thank goodness, I'm with the woman of my dreams. So I'm loving being with Wendy, and I will wash dishes and pots and pans for the rest of my life, so long as the golden challah continue to come out of the oven. It's a wonderful experience. But most people, I think, I mean, when you and I decided to do something early on in the COVID.
Oh, and I never formally thanked you for that. Thank you so much for that. Thank
you.
And
let's explain where that came from, because you were, very thoughtfully, people from Hakafah were calling people like me who are elderly and vulnerable, obviously.
No, we called everybody. We called everybody.
Well, to check on us, and that was so great. And of course, the first two numbers I didn't know, so I thought it was the Democratic Party asking for more money, and or telemarketers, but probably the Democrats. That's why we have a landline phone. But no offense. But the thing is that when you called it, your number came up, and we talked for about an hour, and I expressed my feeling that you shared, and other people did too, that people are that we really care about, that we love, are far away, and many of them are by themselves, and some people are predisposed towards despondency or depression or just, I mean, this is a very scary time, and anyone left to their own thoughts, let alone devices, and I mean that in a digital sense, I mean, this is not a good time to be left to themselves. So, the first thought we had is, let's put on a show. Let's put on a big show. But then, and thinking about it, I think for a day, as I was writing out a treatise to you to try to describe my thoughts, and I realized that would take us 6 weeks to do. The way we'd have dancers and do a choreography, but no, we're all together. But it would take too long. But we wanted to get on, and we did in mid-April, and we were on for 3-4 months, I think, till August. And there were different members of Hakafah community who were cooking and baking and singing and playing and sharing photography and poetry and art. I mean, it was fabulous. The idea was to engage people who, my theory, as a media semi-professional, as I say, was that despite the fact that people early on in the pandemic realized that they had all the time in the world, what am I going to do with it? I'm not going anywhere. And they were stuck with either themselves or whoever they were, residing with. until the kids came back to school,
Hmm.
came back from
Hmm.
school.
Hmm.
The point is that people had no sense of patience, no attention span whatsoever. They were very, very selective about what they were going to do, and
Yeah.
so we had to hit them with stuff that was, engaging immediately. And your recipe, I think, for salmon absolutely hit the mark. I mean, it was.
Wasn't mine. It was someone's from the internet. But thank you. Yes.
Well, they didn't know that all those thousands of people who gave it hits, really weren't aware of it. And only the people who overcooked it complained, by the way. Only the people who overcooked. You want them not to.
So you're saying, so it's about the humanity. Okay, I'll give you that.
I think we all care much more about other people. I think just seeing I mean, it's heart tugging to see profiles of the healthcare workers and the people who really, put themselves on the line. What have we done? What have you done? That's something that people have to be asking themselves. And, it's really important to put that forth.
Rona and I went to an REM concert in the early 2000s. It was around one of the elections. I think it was around 2004. Maybe it was a 2000 election, and it had to be '04. And leading up to it, and I actually like REM very much. I think they're one of three bands or musicians that came out of the '80s that was worth actually listening to. Although I know they're earlier from the '70s, but they really hit it big in the '80s. And he made a comment. Michael, was it Steep? Is that his name?
Michael Stipe.
Stipe. I'm sorry, Mr. Stipe. He made a comment about the president at the time, and there was a guy in front of me who stood up and started booing and saying, "Just play your music." Right. I want to ask you, since we've been talking a lot about music, what makes a good song to you?
Totally subjective. I
I'm
mean,
asking
that's one of the
you.
most.
It's your subject. What is it?
My favorite songs. I
Yeah.
think it's good, excellent musicianship. I think it's solid songwriting. I think it's well. I love REM too, and they did launch in 1983, 82, 83. So they're definitely a band of the '80s.
Okay.
But
Thank you for
one of
correcting
the
me.
problems of their early career was their songs, you could not understand their lyrics at all. But that didn't hurt them when they played the Aragon, for example. At a certain point in their career, they played the Aragon early on, and the acoustics in that building were so bad you couldn't understand the lyrics anyway. So it was perfect for REM. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the thing is that so lyrics, excellent musicianship. Um, it's a matter of the mood you're in. I mean, people ask me, what I want to hear, and it really depends where I am. My job has been to program, a radio station, as you know, for many, many years, and several radio stations over the course of my career, that suits the taste of the public. So I have to be selfless about my taste. My skill, I even will say modestly, my talent is to determine what the taste of the public is. And I never relied on very much research. I had sky high ratings at WXRT radio when I didn't have the benefit of a budget for research, because it's just a matter of seeing how people respond. I'm going to see music as much as I have for the previous part of my career. I was seeing people's response, and that's real. Research should be, are you leaning forward when a song is on, your record player or your system or whatever, your radio, and you turn it up. That's a song you like,
So
as opposed
tell
to
me.
rating it. But
So
it's a passionate thing, so it's got to make you feel the way you want to feel.
when I asked you that question, did a song pop into your head?
Um, Thousands of songs popped in my head. You know what I'm doing? You know what I'm doing right now? Can I tell you this? I am uploading literally thousands and thousands of songs into an operating system that will enable me to launch an entertainment network in the month of January, probably right after the election. I'm going for the palindromic date of 1/20/1/21.
Cool.
And this is something I've been working on for several years. And there will be music in there for people who are more discerning music fans, who are tired of the junk that they play for the masses, who might not be hip hop fans, though some of that certainly is quality stuff. But it's going to be, blues and jazz and Americana music and, and roots music, things you've never heard the original versions of, and also a channel for me for freeform norm.
So which is right, and already in this conversation, if no one knew you, what they know is that what makes you you, and what people react to and respond to and so love is that you're real, you're genuine, and you're real. You're a schmoozer, but in an honest kind of sense. No, seriously, and you just try stuff, right? So, what is? I asked you what makes up a good song. So, what is music to you? Because you live it. So what is it to you?
Music to me can be a top of, well, it could be the primary source of your attention. And it could also, but I think for people who are consumers of music, it also has to succeed as something that's complementing whatever it is you're doing.
Darn,
For
you're
people,
so difficult. Every time I ask you something directly, you diffuse it
okay,
to the people. I'm asking Norm Weiner, not
dang.
about people.
Okay, why do I like music? Music is my oxygen. Music is what keeps me going. Music,
What-
is what I thrive on. Music is not the most important thing, because we all know what those things are, and family and loved ones, and and the health of all of the above. But honestly, music is the most important thing to me in terms of things that are elective, the things that you can choose. If I could go, okay, if it was going to be like a sandwich or a song, what would I choose? That's a very good interview question, right there.
I'll remember that next time I'm interviewing
Yeah,
you.
I'll try to remember the next time I interview somebody. Yeah, but the thing is that a great song could totally buoy your spirits. It could totally transform your mood. It can make an evening for you, and it could and it can heal. And that's something, Bruce. I mean, I'll go off on a brief tangent. I promise. One of my best friends passed away 2 days before we were recording this. A
Right.
woman who's a great pal of mine in the last few years. She had battled cancer for like 6 years, and she was a New York radio icon. She's been acknowledged, just yesterday on CBS television, because she was a New York, beloved New York radio figure who turned people on to music. That's the most exciting thing. That to me is one of the things I'm proudest of, is that being able to turn people on to an artist that otherwise they wouldn't have known. You're doing a major mitzvah for the people who are on the receiving end of that, as well as for the artist who otherwise wouldn't have been exposed. That to me is the most important thing I think that I do, that I'm capable of doing. And what this woman did, but when she passed away, they announced her passing, and I got the call earlier, and they announced her passing on her radio station in New York. And then after a pre-recorded written announcement, announcing her passing, they then played 2 hours of the most depressing down, literally. I mean, it's a non-commercial station, so I think they were literally looked up songs death, and then they just played the most somber, solemn, depressing. This was not uplifting. She was the most positive, upbeat
Mm.
person. She went through her whole battle with cancer, trying to have as much fun, go on as many trips with her wife, as many things as she could do to keep her spirits up, and all the people around her. That's the magic of it. So to find an event that moves people this way, and to not try to compensate for that, to not try to be an uplifting, inspirational force, that's what music does for me. That's really the impetus behind this
So
new project.
should they? So you're saying they should not have played the morose music about death. They
No,
should
they
have,
could have played a couple of songs.
but they should have
Get
mixed
it.
it up, made it more a reflection of her to allow
I
people to
sat there
emote.
I sat there in my car and cried, and then I wanted to, just go through my day and not talk to anybody. But
So
with them playing music like that, I had to turn it off.
so first, let me take a moment to honor that memory, and may her memory be a blessing. And um, I hope she didn't suffer.
Amen. Thank you.
Um,
Rita Houston, a wonderful person.
so
A
thank you
red
for
light.
bringing that up. I had Kerry Frumpkin on here a number of episodes ago, and I asked him if there was a composer that when he thinks of that composer and listens to that music, invokes within him what he perceives to be Jewish values. Look, what you just said to me, Norm, I've been trying to get you, not get you like got you, but to get you to talk about you. And I made a mistake there, and I apologize. Because what is you and what you are at your core, for me, is someone who just wants to bring people joy, who just wants
Thank
to
you.
bring
Thank you.
people, who just wants to give people an opportunity to feel love and to love. And that's what just came out right there in what you just said. I want to take this to you. Is there an artist that when you hear the music, the combination of the music and the lyrics and how it's all put together, like you said before, is there someone that speaks to you either as, I don't want to go religious experience, but is there someone that that for you speaks to Jewish values? It doesn't have to be a Jewish artist by any means, right? That when you hear the whole thing, for me it was Tracy Chapman. Tracy Chapman is my prophet. I had the honor of knowing her bass player, so I got backstage in Cincinnati. I didn't get to meet her, but is there someone like that for you?
Well, yes. To reassure you that I will answer that question. I want somebody saying yes. Um, but not because of the lyrics. I mean, someone who fills me with this sort of spiritual fulfillment. Their music fills me with that, and I know what records I'd put on, and I would listen to them for 2 or 3 hours, and it would be John Coltrane. John Coltrane,
Oh my
who's
God, my son Eli will love you for that answer. Go ahead. Yeah, go
he
ahead.
is an incredibly
Oh my
spiritual
God.
being. His final albums were totally related to to his spiritual involvement. The Love Supreme
Love
was the name
Supreme.
of his
Love
basic
Supreme.
classic album of 50. And they've since uncovered music that had previously been unreleased. When he died in 19, I think 65, 64. My sister called me. I was at summer camp in Connecticut, and she made an excuse that there was something. There was, I think she said a death in our family, and so they immediately got me out of the mess hall and ran to the payphone because that's how things were then. And then she said John Coltrane died, and I cried, because I'd seen him. The advantage of being as old as me, there's some disadvantages. But one of the advantages, I saw a lot of the jazz greats and blues greats. I saw, and seeing John Coltrane on several occasions with Eric Dolphy, seeing Miles Davis a bunch of times, Charles Mingus, all those people, broadcasting them when I was
Mm.
really too young to do so, but we broadcast them live in Boston every Tuesday night. Famous legendary jazz musicians and blues people too, then to share that with people so they could experience that. But Coltrane absolutely does for me. The sound of his horn, in
Mm.
whatever context he's in, especially before he started having all 9 musicians playing simultaneously, that was a movement in jazz,
Yes,
but
it
not as
was.
satisfying personally. Uh, unless the moving experience was your neighbor next door, because turn this up, they would probably leave pretty soon. Anyway, sorry. But it's amazing. I mean, John Coltrane, Love Supreme. That's my pick for the spiritually uplifting.
So,
Although, as far as Orthodox Jewish musicians go, Peter Himmelman, my buddy Peter Himmelman's the guy. And I know BB loves him too.
good. So BB got a shout out on this one too. We'll see if she watches. I'll know because she'll say something. So,
And Peter Himmelman, is Bob Dylan's son-in-law. I
yeah,
don't
I
know if
did
you
know
know
that.
that.
I did know
Yeah.
that. Yeah. How did you feel about Dylan's deal recently?
I think it's astounding. I think can I be snarky?
You can be whatever
Because
you want to be. It's just us.
I think he was underpaid, $300 million for all those songs. But as friends of mine speculated, the whole point is they're going to take these songs, as they did with Beatles songs when they were purchased by another publisher, and make them into commercials. And so
Right.
the window of opportunity is closing, because the people who will respond to lyrics from a Bob Dylan song,
Right.
we literally are a dying breed. And so, they better hurry up and put, Blowing in the Wind to a, Subaru commercial, or, whatever, all of them, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, whatever. There are songs, not his song, but, all of the classics really need to be adopted, because believe me, the middle and late period, Bob, are not really going to be appropriate for a detergent commercial. And
Oh my God. I saw him with the Dead in 1985 in the Akron Rubber Bowl.
oh
I
boy.
have to tell you, it was one of the worst concerts I've ever heard. And only because, I mean, every Dylan concert I've been to has not been the best concert, and I keep going back because I will always go back. But it was because I was on the 50-yard line and the back speakers were parallel with me. So
Yeah.
I heard the stage and then I heard the delay at the same time. So I couldn't hear a song for what it was. I mean, I know that most people at a Dead concert, it doesn't matter, but it mattered to me because I could
No. Actually, the Dead invest in probably the finest sound
I
systems
believe that. I didn't
out
say
there.
the
Yeah,
Dead. I
absolutely.
didn't
For
say the
years.
Dead. I said the people who were there. I didn't talk.
Yeah, I
I
know.
wasn't talking about.
But I mean, they want their people to have the option to hear it. But here's the thing, and again, I'm opposed to wagering. And actually, I mean, I don't bet. I don't go on anything. Um, but we used to wager in recent years. Let's say in the 2000s, at Bob Dylan concerts. And in Chicago, he would sometimes play 3 or 4 nights in a row at different size venues. So my friends and I would go to a few of these shows in a row, and we would wager who would be the first one of us who could recognize what Bob Dylan song he was singing. Because unlike some artists who sing it the same way for years and years and years, Jerry Lee Lewis never changed a whole lot of shaking going on. Bob will change. Is that Tom Thumb's Blues or is that like a Rolling Stone? Is that Positively 4th Street? And you can't tell because he does it in a totally mishmash way. And that's a fun way to stay awake at a Dylan show.
I got 2 more questions for you.
Essay questions or the multiple choice?
We'll see.
Okay.
So everyone in the music industry knows you, and you know quite a few artists over the years. Is there any artist that over your experience and your interaction with them that you actually felt knew you for you and wanted to know you for you?
God, I wish I could say John Lennon. You ended that question in a different way, but thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, but I did hang out with John and Yoko once for an afternoon.
Oh yeah. No, say it right. They hung out with you, please. But go ahead.
Okay. This is kind of an easy answer, but I'd say Bono. Yeah. I mean, I knew them when they were teenagers when they first started out, and I would spend time with them socially. I would lead them. I mean, they were like 19 and 20 when they first came to Chicago. Their first show was like a $5 XRT budget show, so-called, at Park West. And we were, when we got friendly, and I did a lot of things with them, and, I would get copies of their albums before the world heard them, because they wanted my feedback, believe it or not. And Bono knelt over in a memorable backstage event and actually kissed Wendy's pregnant stomach when she was pregnant. And I'm
how did she feel about
which
that?
child it was, and I'm wrong. They better watch this. So one of our lovely, perfect children. And but I mean, we've been involved in late night conversations. He's gotten embroiled in a lot of the political things that we've done. He even made some lovely comments about me when I was honored by the city of Chicago a few years ago. And one of the quotes that I don't use that video, that I vowed to him it would not ever be posted online, because he shot it himself with his selfie, like a 2-minute free-form poetry slam thing about Norm Weiner. But basically he said if it weren't for him, he said if it weren't for me, if it weren't for me, there wouldn't be you two. Not true at all, but how nice of him to actually say that.
Yeah.
But he's an amazing force because he is the embodiment of someone whose music means so much to so many people around the world and has done so much that's clearly not in the best interest of his band, has no connection with his career as a rock star, as a pop star, as a songwriter, but just doing the right thing and helping people. And I remember when he was struggling and calling me, I could tie in a Bono story. Maybe I'll save this later, but yeah, I remember when he was calling me, because he wanted me to connect him with someone from Oprah's show, because he desperately thought Oprah would be someone who'd let him talk about his RED campaign to help solve or attack the AIDS epidemic in Africa, which he'd been very involved. And I don't know anybody at Oprah's show, so I wasn't able to do that. And eventually, when they met, it was love at first sight. And she was on, and she vowed him, and they went out to meals together. And for years, till this day, they're still great friends. But I was leaving Rosh Hashanah services in the around 2010, and I could look up the year, but this is spontaneous. And of course, as the memorial service always leaves me weak, and as does the fast, the cumulative, the 1-2 punch of the 24 hours from sunset to sunset. And that was before that we added the post service rituals that really brought us back. That really so I left there always as a shell of myself. This was in Winnetka, and let's have a drink. So I excuse me. So I get into my car and I'm just a mess, and just ready for the 10-minute drive home to Wilmette. And my phone rings, and it's Bono's person. This is like sunset. It was early then. It was an early Yom Kippur, and so it was probably about 6:15, 6:30. And Bono's person called and said, Well, this will show you kids how long ago this was. Bono tonight. Bono is going to be making a surprise appearance at the Aragon Ballroom. He's going to be coming on stage to surprise the audience in the middle of a Rolling Stones concert. Rolling Stones played 3 different size venues, so they played the
Right.
ballpark, whatever.
Right, right.
So he was gonna. They were playing instantly sold out, of course. Rolling Stones at the Aragon. Bono was going to be a surprise guest and walk on. He's petrified, Norm. You've got to help us. Get here right away. Bono doesn't know the words. He knows he's going to be singing with "It's Only Rock and Roll," and he doesn't know the words. This was before lyrics.com. Genius lyrics. These are all the song lyrics were readily available to everybody on your phone. I'll be right there.
Wow.
Let me take off my suit. And so I'm sitting there in the balcony with him. Okay, it's only rock and roll, and I like it. Follow after me.
How do you
I was
do?
in Yom Kippur.
How do you do?
He did well as he came out from the back of the stage and like strolling out and really swaggering like only Bono can with the sunglasses on. People said, "Whoa, that looks like Bono." But in disbelief, they didn't think it was Bono.
You could have just taught him what you learn in acting 101, right? Is if you're an extra, you just say watermelon. You just mouth watermelon. It looks like whatever you're supposed to be saying. Okay, question number 2.
Sorry.
And this will end. I just want a quick update on your kids. How they doing? And grandchild. Tell me.
You want a syllable? You want an adjective? They're all doing well.
Okay, give me specifics. Quick specifics for each.
Jack is. I'll start with the youngest, the shortest. Jack is 16 months old now. He can almost repeat every word that Joe says. Joe saw him to say "dang" the other day because that's what Grandma always says. That's Wendy's strongest language. Except for certain things that happen.
I love Wendy. I love Wendy.
Yeah.
She's such great energy. Go ahead.
But he loves to dance with Joe, and in Joe's arms, and he loves music. And he's learning to click his fingers, and he can name his aunts by name because who he's gotten to know on small screens. He doesn't watch any other screens, just phones for FaceTime and Zoom calls. So but. The girls who each live alone, Catherine here in Chicago, and Old Irving, still working for the University of Illinois Foundation, doing fine.
Good.
Thanks. And of course, we see her somewhat. And then Becca, who's living in Brooklyn at Greenpoint, working for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
She's still working there.
Loving it. Yes. Obviously a great job. Wonderful people. Though Becca's, doesn't necessarily see eye to eye with all the politics there because she's further to the left. God bless her. Yeah.
Norm, I feel like we just started. I am exhausted. This was fantastic. Thank you for giving us the time. Thank you for letting Hakafa, the greater circle, get to know you. And I know that when people watch this, they're going to love it as much as I love you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. And I want to get to a game this year. Looks like the White Sox are going to be good. It looks like they're going to be actually good enough that I'm going to want to go because normally White Sox baseball is so boring and so bad. All you White Sox fans, sorry. I am, as you all know, a fan of the Cleveland team, which I hope becomes the Cleveland Rocks. I don't know if you saw that as one of their options. I think that's a fantastic name.
Oh, great idea. That's a great idea.
Isn't that a great name?
Because I read it's Cleveland Naps after Nap LaJoie.
You saw the Spiders, you saw the Buckeyes.
Rocks. That is a
the Cleveland Rocks
idea.
is such a. Someone said the Cleveland Wild Things, which I don't think is so good as a.
Cleveland Rocks.
Isn't that a
Bruce,
great
that
name?
Is fabulous.
I saw that somewhere.
Absolutely.
Anyhow.
Think of the logo. It could be little boulders. But the other thing, okay, so I was going to say 2 things at a postscript. Not to get in the last word, even though that's my custom.
Get
One
it.
is you didn't mention the Indians yet. We didn't talk about that.
We could have.
Sheep Wahoo goodbye. But second of all, I set you up for Pete Rose when we talked about gambling.
I know.
Cincinnati icon. Okay, well, let's just let that go for now.
Well, I was thinking about I was thinking about the Black Sox, but yes, as a sequel, we can go there. They got rid of Wahoo 2 years ago.
Yeah, right. The image.
It worked really well.
And as sort of a harbinger of things to come, a foreshadowing, I'm considering launching a podcast because my network, among other things, will have podcasts on it. And the name, and I'd like to have you as one of my first guests. And the name of my show is I Digress.
Fantastic. So,
hey,
Norm, it's wonderful. Thank you. And that concludes our episode, everybody. And I'll see you next time. Take care.